Onassis Foundation.
Dublab.
Welcome to the Quarantine Tapes, a daily podcast from Onassis LA and Dublab. Hosted by Paul Holdengraber, this series chronicles shifting paradigms in the era of social distancing.
Hello.
Hello, could I please speak with Melody Wainscott?
This is Melody.
Melody, hello, this is Paul Holdengraber calling you. I'm so happy you're taking my call for the Quarantine Tapes. It's a pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to speak with you as well.
It's so wonderful to have you on the phone now and to speak about really the ways in which perhaps the world has caught up to you. In a way, what the world is experiencing now is what you have been living for a long time. Perhaps for our listeners, you could unpack what I just said. I should also say that Melody Wainscott is a biologist and a researcher, and so I would love you to expand perhaps on what I said initially.
Well, I'm happy to give you some background. I was accidentally born into an isolating circumstance. My mother was ill with a lung disease, and she was so ill for her entire life that she had surgery performed at the age of 16 where they amputated the bottom half of her lungs out. She was basically a guinea pig for a disease called bronchiectasis. So,
what is the disease called?
I was bronchiectasis. Basically, you have so many episodes of upper respiratory infections that the tissue in the lungs it loses its elasticity and it will harbor bacteria. So you're continually dealing with bronchitis and infection in your lungs. So at that time, antibiotics had not been created that could deal with her particular problem. So she was a guinea pig at John Seeley Hospital in Galveston. We're from the Gulf Coast area and had that done. But she was considered successful, but she remained ill for the rest of her life with issues with her lungs and compromised immune system. So as children, my brother and I were pretty much isolated as far as visiting with other friends and bringing them over because our mother was very delicate. And then we also lived out in a rural section on the Gulf Coast of Texas, east of Houston. So we were also geographically isolated. So the isolation was something that I learned in my childhood. Later on in life, I became a single mother, which is an isolating circumstance. And then about age 40, I started becoming ill with multiple chemical sensitivities and trying to understand what was happening and why it was happening. But becoming so super sensitive to pollution in the environment until I've become like an expert on pollution in the environment. Pet allergies, friends who have pets can't come into my house without some long drawn out procedure. So none of these things were something that I thought, but they in fact physically isolated me.
So when I say in a way the world has caught up with you, this is an explanation of that. The quarantine, in a way that people are forcefully living now on a global scale, if they respect the quarantine, that is something
That's right.
that is something that you've known for so long. So in a way, one could say that your expertise or your experience over a lifetime since your mother became ill when you were 16 has served
No,
you.
it was when she was 16.
Oh, when she was 16. Forgive me.
She gave birth. Yeah, she gave birth to me after having the surgery, which is remarkable in and of itself.
So you've lived with vulnerability and fragility, first of your mother and then of your own, for as long,
Right.
nearly as long as you can remember.
Yes, my entire life. Right. So right now, what I'm experiencing,
Tell me.
of course, I feel the distress of the virus, and I do understand viruses somewhat, having been a biologist in my working career. And also having studied viruses for my master's degree, only at the humanities level. I have a great respect for this virus and understand what an RNA virus is and why it's so dangerous. But my life itself has not changed that much.
That's interesting.
Because I'm already isolated. It's like in trying to protect myself from pollution and allergens in the environment, I'm protecting myself from the virus already.
So people are joining you.
That's right. I feel like I've been in this room of, and it's not really for me. I don't see it as socially isolated. I see it as I'm physically isolated because I have all these mediums for social networking, but I'm physically isolated, and I've been in this room of physical isolation, and now I feel like the entire population is in my room.
Are people turning to you for advice?
They are. I have been inundated with phone calls, people, first of all, just being kind and checking up on me. And then other people.
Kindness, you know, in the quarantine tapes, which we began a week ago, kindness is something that comes up again and again and again.
Yes, I'm so happy to see it being so expressed so widely. You know, this is what we're all hoping for, is that kindness will be the outcome. So I have been inundated with phone calls of people checking up on me, and then people wanting to know where I am, you know, in my living situation. People just, some people have been in distress at being isolated, physically isolated.
Do you have advice for them? Because, you know, it's so interesting that in a way you have perfected. Well, we'll talk about this in a moment, the difference perhaps between loneliness and solitude, but you have perfected your ability of being alone. And, you know, I've quoted this line to just about all my guests so far, but Blaise Pascal, a great scientist and a great philosopher and a great thinker, said 4 centuries ago, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. That's not a problem for you.
No, but it is something that I'm thinking about, like deep diving into that statement and trying to understand it, trying to unpack it. It's quite deep. But it's not a problem for me. It's not a problem for me because I understand what I have to do to be with myself, to be with my solitude. There are certain things that I do. Would you like to know what they are?
I was about to ask you, but in a way, Melody, it's marvelous. You're asking me to ask you, and I was about to ask you, so I'm asking you. Please tell me, because I think, in a way, learning how to live with oneself in a moment of crisis can be very helpful for learning how to live with oneself in a moment of seeming non-crisis.
Well, maybe I should start at the beginning. Since you're a quoteaholic, you might appreciate Einstein's a quote: "The world as we have created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking. So all we have to do is change our thinking." And the way I
an
did this,
easy task, right?
it is a very difficult task.
Yeah.
It is an extremely difficult task to change your thinking from I'm alone, therefore I am lonely, to I'm with my solitude. And to be able to make that transition where solitude is a noun, it is a friend, and being with that, it takes a lot of work on the part of the individual. But I think hearing that someone has been successful doing that could be helpful to people who are in distress right now.
So help us.
So the way that I am with my solitude was understanding that I had to change my thinking because the loneliness was intense. It was quite real. So how am I going to be with my solitude? Well, I know that I have to be present. I have to be grounded in the present. And people have to find their own way how to ground themselves right here in the right now. And for me, I've found it's accomplishing mundane chores that we don't really think about as being that important. I like to cook, and I like to make everything from scratch, and that grounds me in the present, cooking, feeding myself, and taking care of myself. I like to garden. I have always raised my own food. I was raised in a garden. So I'm really into providing food for myself and going through that process. And I was a botanist in my biological career.
And I want you to
I like
talk.
to clean.
I want you to talk about before we get to cleaning. I want you to talk about gardening and vegetables and feeding yourself from the product of your own garden, because I think that is a very important part of what you do.
It is. It's who I am. I grew up with 3 generations, and we were all gardening, and we were organic gardening, but nobody had that verbiage at the time. So here, I am growing. I've hired someone locally. We practice social distancing. He came and tilled up the yard and in what I had designed. So I'm growing food that will be ready soon. Okra, basil to make pesto, borage flowers just to eat because they're beautiful and the bees love them and they're really good for us. And then I have sweet potatoes and several variety of squash, winter squash, that come in their own packaging. And you don't have to do anything to them but stack them on a shelf. So they last for many, many months without any kind of processing. So that's what I'm doing for myself to be able to have food security. Because that's on my mind now.
You wrote to me and said that you're creating an informal economy, and you're creating an informal economy with someone who is your neighbor and whose political views you may not share.
This is true. So my next door neighbor here, a single woman, is a Trump supporter, Republican, and we share a border with a fence, and we don't care about our political differences. We are clearing out this volunteer scrubby plant life that has grown around the fence that's blocking the sun. And we both want to grow vegetables in this area, and we're using our yards as productively as possible. So we have hired the same person who we both have the same yard man who is cleaning that up so we can have vegetable gardens right next to each other. And so that's informal economy that's the type of behavior I'm hoping to see where we drop all our differences as far as politics and religion and get down to the basics, which is we've all got to eat.
So your training, not only your solitude and removal in a way from what passes for normal life, has helped you, but your training as a biologist has helped you greatly. You actually understand what we need to do at this moment.
I understand we need to remain physically isolated in as much as we possibly can if we're not a front line worker. We don't have enough testing going on to really see what the data is. For instance, I live in a county right now where there's not one case reported, but we don't really know that that's true.
Because people haven't been tested.
I understand. That's right. It's a matter of who's been tested and who's reported that they have symptoms of it. So I'm not really trusting that there's not really anyone here. So for the next few weeks, staying out of public and isolating is imperative that we do that. Being able to be self-sufficient and have your own food through this just helps to relieve the anxiety greatly.
I know also that you rely on certain writers to inform you both about the present and maybe in a larger way what we might call wise people. And I know that we, in exchanging some messages with each other, we've come upon some people we really admire, both, whether it's Robert Macfarlane or Barry Lopez. They seem to inform the way you think. And then there are other writers like Spencer Wells and Suzanne Simard and Paul Stamets and Michael Pollan, all who inform the way you think about the world at the present moment. And I'm thinking both about the activity of reading at this moment, reminding myself of the wonderful line of Harold Bloom when he said, "Reading well is one of the great pleasures that solitude can afford you." So reading, in a way, is a way of both being isolated but deeply in one's solitude. And I'm wondering if you can say something about these voices I mentioned.
Yes, I'm a big reader and always have been since I've learned to read. I'm what Coleridge called a library cormorant. I like to do deep dives into literature and go deeply. For the past 4 years, I've been reading extensively Rob Macfarlane's books. And I also am fascinated with his word of the day that he has just restarted on Twitter, where he presents words we're not totally familiar with, especially if you don't live in the UK. But the event and the purpose is the rewilding of our vocabulary in these words that often describe natural phenomenon. And with the rewilding of our vocabulary, we rewild our thoughts and hopefully rewild our actions in thinking about the environment. Before I started reading Rob Macfarlane's books, I read everything Barry Lopez had written, and I was fortunate enough to be able to meet him on several occasions because he was the visiting distinguished scholar at Texas Tech University, and that is where I worked as a biologist. So his wisdom is so excellent. Everyone should read his latest book, Horizons, but also go back and search all of his books for wisdom. I'm a personal fan of his small volume, Resistance. And then I'm really into the new documentary, Fantastic Fungi, which was made by Paul Stamets, mycologist, and filmed by Louis Schwartzberg. And it describes the mycelial networks
You have to explain.
and mushrooms.
You have to explain to me what mycelium is, because I know it's an obsession and interest of yours. But but forgive me. You know, my ignorance runs deep, and I always say I have holes in my culture so it can breathe. But I really don't know what mycelium is, except that it's a fungi.
Well, it's a hyphae that grows underground, one after the other, and you put a lot of them linked together, and they're mycelium, and they are a network, and they're also an image as the internet is also networked in this way. Our neurons in our brain are networked this way. It's got the same configuration. So everything in the world is filled with mycelium. They're everywhere. They're the largest kingdom in whatever number of kingdoms you subscribe to. There are more mushrooms than anything else. So they bring everything together. They're what sticks everything together. They communicate. And they're absolutely fascinating creatures. They have membranes that are reacting to our presence when we walk on the ground. I believe Susan Simard, who discovered that trees communicate with each other through a mycelial network, says that there are like 300 miles of mycelium underneath each footstep that we take.
So extraordinary.
As we walk across the earth.
Extraordinary. There's been such a resurgence recently, in part through Robert Macfarlane, but not only. There's such an interest now in how trees communicate with each other. The intelligence of
utterly
trees.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating.
The idea that nature is intelligent is utterly fascinating, and that's what Paul Stamets believes, and he is seeking to find how to communicate with mycelium throughout the world in his research that he does.
So fascinating. It really is. And reading at this moment is helping you?
Yes. Reading deeply right now always helps me. I'm reading Nan Shepard's The Living Mountain with a reading group on Twitter that Rob McFarlane is hosting. So having that interaction with other people on Twitter who are in this coronavirus book club together is essential. But I still, do my own deep diving into literature. I'm really expanding out.
But what is interesting also is this social distancing that is happening now is bringing some people together around reading groups. There's a reading group happening now with a public space around War and Peace, Tolstoy's War and Peace, where people are reading 15 or 20 pages a day. You recently told me that you're reading with your daughter on FaceTime, and you're reading, of all books, The Capital by Karl Marx.
Yes, well, that's on my homework list of where we're going to. We're right now starting with Undercommons by Fred Moten, and she's got me listening to podcasts, which I'm really big into listening to podcasts too, because I am isolated and I don't speak that much. It's great for me to hear intelligent conversation. So I'm warming up by listening to The Dig. She wants me to read Disaster Capitalism by Naomi Klein. But the first thing that she wants me to read with her is Undercommons, and then from that move into the Marx.
So I want to talk.
So I continue to learn.
It seems quite apparent to me, Melody, that that's something that will never leave you. However isolated you may be, you people your solitude in a deep way. I'm reminded of the great sentence by the poet Marianne Moore, who said that the cure for loneliness is solitude.
That's so true.
I'd love you to...
So true.
Oh, tell me. I love the way you say so true, because it feels like it has echoed in you. So tell me, if I were to listen to that echo, what would I hear?
Well, you would hear a woman who was so lonely and in so much pain because of being physically isolated for years. And that I actually went through all of that I would hope everyone else could not have to go through all of that, and moved into understanding by changing my thinking, because someone actually told me that I need to be with my solitude. Don't be lonely, be with your solitude. And it was a revolutionary moment. It was an epiphany kind of moment for me. That then and I'm not saying it happened overnight, but I realized that I had something I could actively do besides feeling lonely.
Being a scientist at this moment, as we close this conversation, I'm wondering if you have any insight or any advice or any suggestions on how people might behave over the next few weeks. What you think they should avoid without going into the direction of panic?
Well, if you find that social media is causing you distress, limit your time in social media. I do that by following certain people whom I know I want to hear from, who are not going to cause me distress. Then I set up notifications, and then I just look at my notifications so that I'm not seeing real Twitter. I'm just seeing my own version of Twitter. And also, if you're feeling isolated and extremely anxious, I cannot overstate how much moving your body around helps to relieve that. Find some kind of physical exercise that you can do that you enjoy. Doesn't matter. Nobody's going to see you. Just get out there and do it. And keep learning. Keep thinking. Keep dreaming. I have a dream.
Tell me.
Try to do this.
Tell me a dream. Tell me one dream in closing.
Okay, so my dream is that when I do my walk around the block, I come into the proximity of the community gardens here in this area, and there is nothing going on. And having been heavily involved with the Beacon Food Forest in Seattle, Washington, and sat on the steering committee and dug out there with a shovel and everything in between, my dream is for this community here to be able to plant their own food forest, and to do that under conditions of social isolation will be challenging. But I would love to see this community have its own food security, and know that in the process of them building this, they'll build community. And the people who build community are the ones who survive the best in these types of situations.
Melody, on that dream, which is a hope and which might be possible, I bid you farewell, and it's been a pleasure talking with you, a real pleasure, and I'm looking forward to communicating with you further. Thank you so much for Thank you so much for taking this time. Really, it's been most agreeable. Really, really, and I think we should encourage everybody to read some of the books that you love. I think in particular the two that I really adore are Robert Macfarlane and Barry Lopez. Melody, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.
Until soon. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.
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 To support this show and Dublab's progressive programming, go to dublab.com/support.